Hello and welcome to the Creative Career Change podcast with me, Hannah Ash. I make my living working simultaneously as a music teacher, an interior designer, a writer, a podcaster and more. You can read more about me and my work on Substack. Visit shayhanny.substack.com. That's Shayhanny spelled Chezhanny. Today I'm talking to illustrator Helen Ridley about her career journey. Helen, welcome to the Creative Career Change podcast. It's lovely to have you here to talk to me today. Could we start by you briefly introducing yourself to us?
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Helen. I'm a live illustrator and creative workshop host. I'm based in Reading in Berkshire. And I've been working as an illustrator for about 4 years now.
Brilliant. Okay. And so could you maybe explain to us how you came to that career as an illustrator? Because obviously that's partly why you're here today, to talk about your career change journey. So maybe start from the beginning and take us through how you found yourself where you are today.
Okay, so I have always been very creative. At school, art was always my favorite subject. I wanted to do all creative A levels, but I ended up doing history and English as well, to balance it out. But in the end, I did a fashion design degree, which was my passion at the time. And the degree I did was very creative, very experimental, less commercial, which perhaps didn't prepare me for the real world of working in that industry. But it was really fun and creative, and I met lots of fantastic people through studying. But I came out of doing my fashion degree loving the illustration side of it, but not really understanding how to become an illustrator, how to get paid as an illustrator. The concept of working as freelance was not something really communicated to us when I was studying. And so I did a few sort of small like internships and short-term roles within the fashion industry, but they just didn't pay very much or at all. So for me, I started temping to get some money and kind of fell into a career I ended up having for about 10 to 13 years, where I worked as a product technologist for a range of different retailers in the UK. So that meant I was working with buyers and merchandisers, developing new products to put on the shelves. So it was mainly homewares. I was working on textile homewares, also did sort of fashion accessories at one retailer. But I would work with the buyers and product developers to develop these products. My job was to make sure they were safe, they were tested, that they were going to function correctly. I'd be reviewing samples when they came into our offices, and I'd also be going out to visit factories all across the world, and I'd liaise with suppliers and agents. So it was very varied, and there was some fun travel involved. And so I got to travel to India and China and Europe, and really enjoyed that side of it. But ultimately, the role just wasn't very creative. And I also felt a little bit frustrated that I never really felt like I was progressing. It was quite hard to kind of get to senior level management. But even if and then I wasn't even sure if I wanted that next step in that type of career. So I just realized I needed to get back to being a creative. It was what I was passionate about. And so in 2020, or around that time, the year before, I'd taken a short course in illustration, helped me understand what illustration is, how I could apply it in a career. And so in 2020, I also was offered redundancy at the role I was in at the time. I decided to take that, even though it wasn't a big payout. I hadn't been in the role very long. The company was just restructuring, but I was like, this is the excuse I need to move forward. And so, because with a lot of us, I'd saved some money during lockdown, I had the flexibility to take some time out to build a business for about the first year as an illustrator. So the first thing I started doing was designing gifts, cards, and decorations that I was selling online. And then as the world started opening up, I was selling in craft markets and art fairs and live events. And I just realized ultimately I was really missing people. So a lot of illustrators tend to be fairly isolated at home in their studios, and I really wanted to be an illustrator, but in a way that meant I worked with people. So I decided to look into working as a live illustrator. I saw a few people doing it as at weddings. It was becoming really popular, so creating live portraits of guests at weddings. So I started practicing drawing really fast and knowing to know that I could draw someone in 5 to 10 minutes. I then started doing some live portraits at local live events, like art fairs and events like that. And it was really popular. And so I started building a portfolio of that type of work, started going to wedding fairs and meeting couples that I could, that were interested in booking me, and started getting booked for the first few weddings that I did within a year or so of starting that process. Um, and since then, I've developed my business to be live event based predominantly. So that's either live illustrating people. I now also illustrate dogs at lots of live events. And I also love teaching creative illustration and watercolor workshops. And I now co-host a watercolor and calligraphy retreat twice a year with a friend of mine who is called Jodie Rose Calligraphy, and she and I host the Flow and Flourish retreats. And the next one is in just over a month on the 6th of April.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, that's so interesting, isn't it? How you've started at the point of the word illustration, which I mean, to me, I don't know huge amounts about that, but like it kind of is this huge umbrella term that me could mean so many things. And it strikes me that you've kind of given yourself that opportunity to explore lots of different things that come under that heading of illustration and really diversify it into something that kind of works for you, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. The other thing that I would really recommend if anyone's interested in the world of illustration is to join the Association of Illustrators, the AOI. And I actually still work part-time with them as an awards coordinator for the World's Illustration Awards. But when I first started out, I was already an AOI member, and they are fantastic at helping illustrators, yeah, get started in that industry. It helps you understand the sheer variety of illustrations. So doing the World Illustration Awards, there's 10 categories. So it's in advertising, so that means where you're working with brands, which can be where some really big money is in illustration if you can get into that side of the industry. There's animation, which is obviously a huge growing part of illustration, and is becoming much easier with things like Procreate Dreams and lots of much more accessible programs to help you animate your illustrations. There's also the children's publishing and book covers side of the industry, which I haven't explored in depth, but was something I was interested in at first. And there's the editorial side, which is where people are more familiar. So you're illustrating for magazines, newspapers, online websites, etc. And there's also like site specific. So you're doing murals in live events or publishing in a wider sense. So it can be published, so illustrating non-fiction books as well as kids' books and fiction book covers. So once I started working with the AOI and the awards, it just made me realize how varied the industry is. And the live illustration side of it, again, is quite niche, not represented in the awards actually necessarily, but there's live illustration where you perhaps would be like a live scribe. So you're doing graphic recording of an event. So like a meeting notes, but like illustrated meeting notes, which is really, really fun. And then there's the sort of figurative live illustration. And there's also kind of illustrating onto products and bottles and perfume, like with personalizing products and things like that at a live event as well. There's just so many ways you can apply illustration, really. But some parts of the industry pay better than others. And I think for most illustrators, they tend to have a range of revenue streams to make money as an illustrator.
Yeah, that makes sense. How did you find that going from having a kind of, regular salaried job? You mentioned that you'd got some savings through probably not being able to go out and do anything for a period of time over lockdown. But how have you found that transition from, I imagine a bit like I find with my freelance work, some months are great and some months are not. And I don't know, how do you kind of deal with that and how have you learned to deal with that over time?
It's still something I'm getting the hang of. I think it's become easier now. I'm a couple of years into the live illustration side of it, which for me has been much more consistent and reliable income than when I was trying to sell cards and gifts. If you go down the route of selling illustrated products that you design, you really need to explore wholesale to be able to scale that at enough volume. And also licensing your designs as well is another way of getting income from that side of things. If you enjoy like surface pattern design and print design and illustration. But so for me with the live illustration, I don't need to work like a 9 to 5 week in the same way. I do a certain number of events per month, and certain times of the year are much busier than others. So I always know that January is very, very quiet. I'm unlikely to be doing events in January. It's starting to become busier at this time of the year in the spring, and I've started to have events in March. And then sort of through the summer, it's always busy with wedding events. And I sometimes have sort of autumn, winter weddings, but usually they're based in the summer. So I know that a lot of my income will be in the summer. And then around Christmas, it's always busy for live events, whether that's in-store activations where I'm illustrating in shops and retail companies, or if I'm at sort of parties and Christmas parties, Christmas brand pop-ups and launches, etc. So yeah, it can really it once you understand the ebb and flow of the year, you realize some parts of the year are better than others. And so basically I don't ever sort of spend the money that's I'm getting in that moment. I'll always put it aside into different pots, like my salary pot, my tax pot, my sort of investment in the business pot, etc. And I don't pay myself any more than a certain amount per month, regardless. So I basically set my own salary month by month based on my sort of yearly income rather than my month by month income. And that's kind of it's still taking a bit of practice to get the hang of, but essentially that's the only way you can do it. You can't ever sort of see, oh, I've got this huge lump sum in my account, I'm just going to spend it all, because you just don't know what's going to happen by month. But the longer you work in this type of industry, the easier it gets to plan and to look ahead and sort of know what's going to happen through the year, for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. And I think what you've said there about once you've been doing it for a couple of years, you can start to kind of look back and notice patterns is really
Yeah.
important. 'Cause that's with my interior design business, that's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. So everything you're saying, I'm kind of like nodding along because that's starting to become clear for me as well that when I look at, I'm in the second year of doing it. So there's, I've almost got 2 years worth of comparative month by month income. And it is interesting to see where these patterns occur and thinking about what the reasons are for them. Interesting you say that January is very quiet for you, which makes sense. But I found that January was mad busy in interior design. And I think it was because people spend a lot of time at Christmas maybe just in their own home staring at the same four walls and thinking, oh gosh, I really want to change this. And then suddenly January the first comes and it's like I don't know, there was a real influx of work in a way that I kind of hadn't imagined, but it's helped me to start sort of think about, well, what are the reasons why? And sometimes it, of course, might just be an anomaly and a bit random. But once you start getting an extra year and then 2 years and then 3 years of figures, I guess those patterns start to become clearer and clearer. And as you say, help you to kind of plan a bit more.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the type of clients I'm working with. So for wedding clients, they will be booking a year in advance, a year and a half, 2 years in advance. So that's nice because it means I have things in the diary well in advance, and I know I have certain types of income regardless through the year. But if I work with a branding client, they tend to be a lot more last minute, and not always, but usually sort of around a month's notice or a couple of months. So you have to be quite flexible. You have to kind of account for the fact you may have to change your plans at short notice or not make too many plans in advance.
Yeah.
which yeah, and sort of know and then know what part of the year is likely to be busy. Like there's certain events in the year, like for Mother's Day this year, I'm doing a live event, so I've kept that weekend clear. And Valentine's Day is always popular for live illustration at stores, like personalizing products and things. And then for dog events, that tends to be sort of through the early sort of May tends to be really busy for dog shows and dog events, and then there's International Dogs Day at the end of August, which I have a lot of inquiries about dog events around then, and then just at Christmas, Christmas is just its own thing, and like
Yeah,
it gets
yeah.
busy, but yeah, it does. Yeah, it depends on the type of client you're working with and the type of thing you're wanting to focus on. So you try and sort of plan your year around that as well as to what you're going to focus on at different points in the year.
Yeah. And how do you enjoy that kind of uns I guess there's an element of uncertainty there. Do you sort of feel that you thrive on that and that helps you to kind of keep going with stuff and be excited about it, or do you find it quite stressful?
I find it fairly stressful, partly because I'm still at the point where I'm building sort of relationships with brands. So I did have some amazing opportunities last year, and I'm hoping those will continue later in the year. But at the moment, you basically can't always expect
Mm,
to replicate exactly what they do year on year because depending on budgets and plans. So, but I don't know, it is exciting though because you never know what's happening in and there's and when a really exciting job comes along that you're not expecting and you do have some time and space for it in your diary, then that's so fun to be able to say yes to that kind of thing without it being expected. So I think it's a little bit stressful. I think it's quite similar. Like lots of creatives and illustrators get quite existential in January and a bit like, oh, I'm never going to work again because it's just so quiet and everyone's taking time out. And then it will start picking up again, and you're like, no, this is why I love it. This is why it's exciting. And when you get those first few clients booking you, and you're like, this is why I do what I do. When you have those fantastic conversations and build those relationships, so I think it ebbs and flows through the year as to how excited I am by it. But yeah, overall it is really fun, and I like the variety of it.
what skills do you think you have been able to transfer from your previous job? Because they're kind of different, but I would imagine that there are some transferable elements.
Yeah, well, it's the building relationship side of things. So, my previous job was constantly being on emails and phone calls and meetings with buyers and agents and other colleagues in the wider organization. So I'd be talking to the warehouse, I'd be talking to shop floor staff, I'd be talking to people I worked with in the head office. So you do have to be very good at communicating and very good at communicating via email on the phone. Like I personally don't mind phone calls at all. Maybe that's partly my generation, but like my old job, I just had to get on the phone quite often just to like get something done and make a decision on something.
Mm,
And so I love having phone calls and video calls with clients to like finalize details. Um, and that's, yeah, so that skill still translates now. And yeah, and also I'm probably unusual as a creative in that I'm really good with spreadsheets. I really like spreadsheets. I'm really good at Excel and formulas, etc., because I use them a lot in my old job because I just had to, and I had to learn on the job to do that. It wasn't something I trained in from the off, but over the years I became much more comfortable with them. So nowadays I'm really good with my budgeting, planning, organizing, and tracking what I do on spreadsheets. And yeah, so that side of it doesn't really faze me like the technology aspect, I guess, because of that experience. So yeah, sort of the communication and the being organized and being quite tech savvy have definitely translated really well.
you mentioned earlier that your degree, your fashion design degree, didn't necessarily prepare you for freelance life or the world of work as a freelancer. And it strikes me that you've kind of had to pick up a lot of those skills along the way. Do you think that, I mean, you may not know the answer to this, but do you think that that's changed over time? Do you think that degree courses in those sort of creative subjects are better at preparing students, or is it just something that we have to learn as we go along?
I think it varies depending on the institution. Actually, working at the AOI, they actually offer sort of master classes to illustration students across the country who are member colleges of the AOI, and they kind of do like, yeah, master classes in how to become an illustrator, how to get prepared for working as an illustrator. Um, and I have some friends who work as illustrators who studied in the illustration degrees, and they said that their particular course was really good and did give them insight into setting up a business. So, but I think it really varies. I think from one institution to the next, some will be quite proactive with that, and some perhaps not so much. But yeah, for me personally, it wasn't really addressed. The idea was that we would leave our degree and apply for jobs. So we were taught how to write a CV. We were taught how to kind of apply for creative jobs. So we were sort of I created like a little booklet of my illustrations and photographs of my sort of final project outfits and things, and sort of a little miniature portfolio of me and what I do, and I'd send that in the post with my CV because I wasn't sending emails. This was a long time ago that I graduated, but yeah, so they kind of helped us think outside the box a little bit in that sense. It really wasn't a big part of what we studied, and it was just yeah, I think they kind of and they told us a little bit how to like conduct ourselves in an interview, but the whole working as a freelancer, a big part of it is building a network of people to work with, but building relationships with clients, having a network of other people in your industry that you can um give each other support because you don't have colleagues in the same way. So that again is something I've developed since I've been working freelance, and I now am part of a few different business communities and memberships that mean I have colleagues that I can chat to and get ideas from, we give each other support and celebrate our wins, and and as much because when you get a fantastic client or you do a job that you're really excited about, you want to celebrate with someone that gets it, and that's what you need is a community of people that are in that industry. As much as your friends and family are excited for you as well, it's a different thing when you work with people that understand the day-to-day reality of running your business and how it can be isolating if you're not sharing those things with people like that.
Definitely.
So that's the key thing that I've developed over time, but it takes so if that's something you're worried about, I would just say invest in becoming part of communities like that, going to networking events locally. I'm part of online memberships for marketing, for example. So that's quite a variety of different businesses are part of those. At one of the networking events I went to recently for International Women's Day, it was for all kinds of small businesses in the local area. But I met 3 or 4 creative business owners, and we sort of realized there isn't a lot of these networking events are more business focused as opposed to creative business focused. So we've set up a small group of 4 of us, and we're going to try meeting up every few months or so that give each other feedback on our creative businesses. So sometimes you've got to be the one doing it. You've got to put yourself out there, and I've just set up a little Instagram chat, and we're picking a date to meet. And that's something I've wanted to do for ages. And so I was like, well, why don't I just start it myself? So yeah, it might be a bit scary if you're not used to putting yourself out there like that. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
I think that's really great advice because I agree with you, it can be very lonely at sometimes. And you want to maybe bounce an idea off somebody or share a win, like you say, if some good stuff's happening, you want to tell somebody who kind of gets it, that isn't just like your partner or your family, or it's a bit different, isn't it? And I think you're right that those kinds of things are well worth investing time and sometimes a bit of money into signing up to things where you are going to kind of meet the right people. So I think that's excellent advice. Um, I want to touch on the aspect of creativity. Now, clearly, what you do now as a job is very creative in the sense that you are making things all the time. But I wonder if your career change has allowed you to live more creatively. So, because we can sometimes separate out the creative stuff that we do for our work and our creative selves, but they are probably intertwined in lots of ways. But how much more creatively do you feel that you are able to live now that you've made this career change?
I think it it's strange. I At the moment, I wouldn't say I'm as creative outside of my job as I'd like to be, but I'm probably still being more creative than I ever was in my old job. I think this is quite common with illustrators and artists, is like you're always focused on something that's you're being paid for. So if you have a live illustration job, you're preparing for that, you're practicing for that. Or if I have a workshop coming up, I'm preparing materials for that. And that in itself means that I'm in my studio painting and drawing and experimenting. And I also try and take the time each year to take a short course in something completely different. So this time last year, I did a course in fabric painting. So rather than printing onto fabric, it was about how to paint directly onto fabric to make yeah, and then you kind of can seal in the paint and it can become like a printed fabric. And I did that as a 3-day course about a year ago, and that was amazing and just really fun to just completely get messy for a few days and not have any agenda to make money from it. It was just about being creative. Um, I would like to spend more time in my sketchbook just for fun, and I think I've fallen out of the habit of that recently, but I do also try and do things like I go and see movies that I want to see that are inspiring me. I like to go to exhibitions that I would love to see, and I take my sketchbook with me when I do that. I'm starting to organise artist dates with other friends, so we go and meet somewhere and sketch together. Um, and I also because I did my fashion degree, I love making clothes and sewing. So I like to make gifts and garments for friends and family as well as myself. So I do still do that as well alongside um, the day job I have currently. But it is a bit of a balance because when you are running your own business, you're always thinking about what's next. And it is hard to sort of switch off from that and just give yourself a day to be creative for the sake of it. It feels incredibly indulgent, but it is important and it's something I want to keep making time for this year.
Yeah. And do you find that, I mean, I know this is slightly different because this is more kind of linked to the work, but you mentioned you're a member of a professional body of illustrators, and I am a similar member of a professional body of interior designers, and they do lots and lots of sort of CPD sessions that are obviously related to design, interior design, but sometimes they will just be things like it was like a sketching day of just like going to, I think it was going to a museum in London, and just there was somebody leading it, but it was just like take your sketchbook and some pens and pencils and go along and sort of improve sketching. And I assume that maybe like the illustrators professional body that you're part of have similar kinds of CPD things which are more about creativity.
Yeah, so they have Illustrator meetups, which I think are usually free or not, a small fee. And they are a case of, so they have kind of meetup coordinators across the country and usually in the major cities in the UK. So London, Bristol, Manchester, etc. Um, and they'll host sort of every month or so, or every couple of months, they'll host meetups where illustrators in the area come together and sketch together, or they'll have talks sometimes as well, or they'll kind of have themed ideas on what to sketch when you're there. So they do host those, but because I'm not actually in London, I, I've not been able to go to those sorts of events easily, so I haven't joined them personally. Yeah, that is something I would love to do more of. So it's something I'm trying to cultivate locally instead.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I do try and go to local life drawing. evenings, which happen quite frequently in the Reading area. And that's always a great thing to do because that is always slightly outside of your comfort zone. You know, you're drawing stuff you're not expecting to, and you're always having to think on your feet and trying lots of different materials. So I think like, and because my job is drawing people for a living, like it's good to be drawing a live model
Yes.
who's moving in unusual, different directions and angles that I wouldn't normally draw people in. Um, it's worth doing a few different things, really.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it must be really nice, like doing a life drawing class where you're not being paid, you're there just to draw for yourself. So actually, the end result of it doesn't matter. It's just your own development, your own like getting losing yourself in the art of doing it, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you are still practicing and working that muscle of the live kind of like live illustration, I suppose. So
Yeah, because it's also you've booked that time to just draw. And so whereas if it's self-initiated, you're always kind of like, I'll do it then, or I don't have time. But if you booked it in the diary to go to that session, then all you have to do in that session is draw. And that is lovely to just have that. Um, yeah, so I think I'm going to go to one next week actually. It's in our local library and and they have cheese and wine as well. So
wow.
it's pretty brilliant. I'll just walk down the road to the library and then get to draw for a few hours and have some wine.
That sounds great. You're making me. I think I'm going to look up what's going on in my local library because I sometimes think that I miss out on looking for things like that, and that sounds
Yeah,
like such a nice thing to do. So that's a really good idea.
I find life drawing events or a lot of local events like that are on Meetup usually.
Okay,
Heard of that? It's
I
quite good
haven't,
for
but
like,
I'm going to make a note of that.
yeah, Meetup or Eventbrite, I guess, are the other ones. But
Yes.
if you're looking for local events, particularly creative stuff, those are the two places I often look.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to check those out for sure. Um, as you've been making this career shift, have you had always had the support of your friends and family along the way? How have you found that has been?
Yeah, well, from my family's point of view, I've got two sisters, and all three of us did creative degrees. So one sister did music, and then she studied teaching, and she is an incredible entrepreneur and has set up loads of her own businesses. So she actually set up a clothing business around the time I started, as self-employed. And she now teaches baby sign language as well,
Right.
as a freelancer. And then my other sister studied art and sculpture, and she she doesn't do that as such, but she runs her own business with her partner, her husband, and they run a luxury sort of holiday cottages and wild camping business. So basically, but all three of us are self-employed basically um, in the end. So yeah, I think because of that, and particularly my sister who started around the time I did with her clothing business, I was able to get lots of advice from her on how to get started with the business, and that really helped me to kind of have a bit more confidence at the very beginning. So I think from my family's point of view, and a lot of my cousins are self-employed as well. Like one of my cousins is a wedding hairstylist, so there's a bit of an overlap in the industry we work in. And then so from my friends, not very many of my sort of old school friends and longer term friends are self-employed. But they have always been supportive in what I do. But I think they've found it harder to understand when I was starting out and not making a lot of money. But nowadays they kind of understand it a bit better. But that's the key has been for me to meet friends locally who are self-employed and who do run their own businesses. So that's kind of what the community I've built since I started is finding other people that do what I do and but also that we get on with that I get on with and actually because I work part-time at the AOI, you know, a lot of my colleagues at the AOI are similar to me. They do part-time work and then they do other creative work alongside that. So that has also helped people understand them. I feel like in my previous jobs, I was unusual in the fact I wanted to become freelance and an illustrator, whereas now I'm very much the norm in my
Yeah,
that
because you've
role.
surrounded yourself with with the people who are understanding and do similar sorts of jobs, I
Yeah,
guess.
and it's taken time, and I didn't quite know how to do it when I started out. It takes time to find the right community, but it's just a bit of trial and error, I guess. You just try things. If they don't work, try something else. And it's a lot of kind of being brave and putting yourself out there and making connections with people. Like working with Jodie, who I do the retreat with. She came to one of my workshops at a venue where she also teaches at, and we got chatting and talked about the idea of doing a joint. We were going to call it a workshop, and they were like, actually, this is like a whole day like experience. And yeah, through planning these events with her, um, that's been a fantastic sort of friendship and business relationship as well that has really helped both of us, I think, and given us lots of inspiration.
Yeah, that's great. Um, my final question for you is, if you had one piece of advice to give somebody who was thinking about leaving a salaried job to go into something creative, such as becoming an illustrator, what would that piece of advice be?
The number one thing is don't wait for it to be perfect before you start. Just do it anyway. Um, I think even for me, like I stopped myself from starting a business because I didn't know what to call it for a long time. Ended up calling it my name. I'm just Helen Ridley illustration. That's it. I didn't need to do anything fancy. And I think actually sticking with your name is probably easier to begin with. You can change it to something else later. But if you pick a name that's not you at the beginning, you might not like it later. So yeah, don't overthink that aspect of it either. But at the same time, I would recommend having some sort of part-time work at the beginning to just keep you, like if you can reduce the hours at your existing salary job to like a couple of days a week, or even just reducing it one day, reducing it by one day a week as you build up your business is ideal because then you have that consistent income alongside building a business. But yeah, but also don't give yourself too much of a safety net that you can't leave your comfort zone completely because you do just need to step out of your comfort zone at some point and just go for it. But do make a plan, do a business plan, like understand what your finances need to be for you to make it work. Um, do basic planning in that sense, but also don't plan it to the nth degree that you don't do it. Just get on and do it anyway, and it will just get better and better once you get started. Like when I look back at what my business was when I first started, it was nothing particularly special, but now I'm really proud of it, and it's become something amazing.
Well, I think, yeah, that's great advice. And I think it's everything evolves and we never know where it's going to evolve to. And if you don't allow yourself that opportunity to start somewhere, it never has the chance to evolve, does it? So
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's brilliant advice. Helen, thank you so much for talking to me today. I will share links to your website and your social media pages in the show notes. But thank you for giving up your time. It's been a real joy to hear about your career change story. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
That was Hannah Ash talking to Helen Ridley on the Creative Career Change podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and aren't already subscribed, visit shayhanny.substack.com to sign up and receive new episodes direct to your inbox.